possible to work with developers if they are, I think, responsible to the communities they're working with.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go right ahead.
I think that the community as a whole should start demanding a public process that's led by the county. And they need to be up here, not us. That's what you need to do in terms of going forward. I also think it's really important for individuals to keep hammering away. I have to say, as a public servant, I now, before I was a consultant and I didn't really get it. Now I'm a public servant. They don't call a public servant for nothing. Took a cut in pay. I'm working way harder. I got a million things to do. You have to be a thorn in the side of your poor local public servant. Because we have so many thorns in our sides, we typically pay attention to the one that hurts the most. So you have to be a thorn in the side of your public servant that hurts. And we listen. When I first started on the mill site project, we had a couple of weird people from Casper that kept talking about the marsh. I'm like, what the hell is the marsh? Well, it's this marsh in Arcata, and they kept coming to meetings, and now we always talk about the marsh, and the marsh is going to be part of the plan. So, that's the way politics works. It's not like you come once and you say something and then everybody magically listens to you and they do what you say. People who have that idea about a political process, I'm going to disabuse you of it. It means you have to come over and over and keep hammering away and pounding away to get what you want. I think the other thing you need to think about as a group is how you're going to organize your debate. What are your points of argument? So that you work together instead of at cross purposes with each other. I think it's important to have data that backs up your debate, but I think it's also to understand what are the key values that underpin what you're trying to get across to your community leaders, because those are the leverages that politicians really understand. My experience, some politicians respond to data. By and large, most of them respond to whatever the key value is that you're trying to express through what you're trying to do. So your key value is, I don't know, fill in the blank. Maybe there's 5 of them. Maybe it's those 10 you were talking about. And then I also do think it's important to come up with some sort of alternative. And I think in this case, no alternative isn't necessarily the worst case, because you do have so many other areas where you can do infill in this town.
No alternative meaning leave the Masonite site. Industrial, leave it just the way it is.
Just let it sit for a while till something ripens for it. The other thing that might happen is in 10 years, community college system might want to put a bigger campus here. Or maybe the state college system would want to put a campus in here. That could change things in a big way. We're thinking about that out at the mill site. We anticipate that 425 acres is going to take 20 years to build out. It's not happening overnight. And our specific plan is not going to lay out every single thing. We're going to set a land bank, a reserve, because we cannot see in the future and know exactly what's going to be needed in 10 years, what the opportunity might be.
Michael, can you predict what DDR is likely to do with that land if we say no?
It depends whether they are, at the end of the day, rational actors or not. If they were rational actors, they would come back with a plan that truly reflected ideas being expressed in this room and move ahead with them. And I think you put it well when you said that most developers are not comfortable or expert in mixed-use development, and we have to help them gain that expertise. If they don't have that expertise and don't wish to gain it, then I think they need to be encouraged to sell that property and sell it quick. And it is possible that in this environment, and as all of the factors that I went through begin to sink in their various bottom lines, that they may try to resell it, and then it becomes someone else's problem.
And I think a lot of what they do will depend both on the political process that happens here and how the Board of Supervisors decides to move on this project, if they approve it as is or if they want modifications and resubmissions. But I also think it will depend a lot on how our economy goes. And if if retail continues to take the slide that it is right now in terms of retail spending, and we end up in something worse than a 6-week recession, which it seems like what they're talking about. I almost didn't roll my eyes. I think that will also have implications for the site. And I think the other thing that's important to remember is they probably, for a company of this size, they have very little invested in this site. So they could also just sit on it for 10 years and come back in 10 years with a different proposal. It's not a very expensive site for them to just hang on to and do nothing with.
Michael, what do you say to someone who touts the benefits of competition and firmly believes that a new mall will improve local business?
Yeah, it's a good argument, except it doesn't apply here. I'm thoroughly in favor of robust competition out there, but what you're likely to get, given the numbers that we've seen, is that there will be a little bit of competition, additional competition among chain stores, which by and large are charging prices that are dictated by the central office hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. But where the competition will be taken off the table will be the local businesses. And if you take off the table local businesses, part of that robust competition is going to disappear. And you're going to get more of an oligopoly situation with a small number of big players rather than some big players and some smaller players. So I am a firm believer in competition. And let me add to this that there is a mythology that permeates this debate that big box means cheap goods. Sometimes that's true. A lot of times that's not true. Every year in Maine, the state government does a survey of pharmaceutical prices in the state. And guess what? Big boxes have higher drug prices than do local pharmacies. That is ascertained objectively every single year. It's important for people to have this information. And thinking about what real prices are out there is part of the education process here. Remember, I will go back and say that the most important economic development policy you can do is to rev up local consumers and businesses and public agencies to buy from existing local businesses. And the way to do that is to make them aware of existing discounts and opportunities out there. It requires massive gathering of information, massive public education, but it will have a huge payoff on your economy if you begin to move in that direction.
I also would add to that I think some of us, not all of us, buy not just based on price. And I think that a lot of us are recognizing that there are some costs associated with imports. I don't want to pick on China, but I will point them out, especially environmental costs and costs such as child labor and that sort of thing, that maybe it's not worth getting a pair of underwear for $2 if you know that the bleach that made the underwear white ended up in a river and killed the fish, and the kid that sewed the underwear was a 10-year-old. I mean, I think that people are starting to recognize that that is part of the global supply chain, and not just the buy local because it's good for our local economy, but sort of the buy local from a much larger kind of moral perception. I think is also starting to bubble out, and I think that's part of the reason Walmart is flattened, because there's kind of starting to, not exactly a backlash to Walmart, but sort of a, maybe I don't want to shop there now that I'm understanding more about what they're doing. You know that 80% of the imports that come into the United States through the Port of Long Beach, which is the largest port in the United States, the Port of Long Beach and the Port of LA, is for Walmart. 80% of the imports.
One of the arguments for chain stores is that the goods offered can't be supplied